What is a hero? A mythological figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability? An illustrious warrior? No. It's a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast, where we dive deep into what a hero is and what makes them that hero. I'm your host, Ken Fraunfelter, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the world's most likely and unlikely heroes. You may have never heard of them before, and they most likely have never met you. But they all have one thing in common. They are ready to do whatever it takes to help make you better, even if it means sacrificing everything for you. Let's get into it.
Good morning and welcome to episode 15 of the What's a Hero podcast with me, Ken Fraunfelter. Let me ask you a question. How do you start your day? Now, I know some of us have odd schedules and weird days off, but on the average, how do you start your day? What's your mindset when you crawl, climb, lift, sit up, or fall out of bed? Are you thinking about just falling back into bed? Or wishing you could just go back for 5 more minutes? Or maybe you didn't get a good night's sleep the night before, and you just wish that you can just stay in bed? Do you hit the snooze button 2 to 4 times before shutting it off and actually getting up? Then when you're up, and after you've hit the bathroom and brushed your teeth, what's your plan? Is your mind still trying to face and figure out what you need to do so you can make sure you can do the stuff other people want you to do? Now, I say it like this because there are people out there who don't take their days or lives into their own hands and make it theirs. They drag themselves into a job they hate or maybe tolerate and put the time in only to wish the time would move faster so they can go do things not at work. We've probably all been there or had jobs like that, and I know there are things we need to absolutely do that we don't want to do. But those are just parts of it. For example, I hate doing dishes, but it's a necessary part of cooking and eating, right? That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the day in, day out of just burning time and having no fulfillment. And that's not always happiness I'm talking about. I mean fulfillment. By doing things that bring joy, knowing you're helping or giving to others. The world wants us to only do what makes us happy. Well, for some people, happiness is being introverted and never leaving their home. I guarantee you that will not bring you fulfillment. Take your life into your hands and take care of your responsibilities. There's good and bad responsibilities in everything we do, but do what fulfills you and serve others while doing it. What are your goals? Losing weight, getting a promotion, starting a business, buying a house? It doesn't matter. Write them down and go after them. They might change as you go, but get used to chasing after what you set your mind to. If you don't have a goal right now or you don't know what your goals are, think about what would fulfill you and what you are passionate about and go towards that. I guarantee it has to do with helping others or serving others in some capacity. So, wake yourself up each morning or afternoon or night if you have some goofy schedule with purpose, knowing that you're going to work to make happen that day what you want to make happen. Set your clothes out or pack your bag the night before, get up on the first alarm or before it, go to the bathroom, brush your teeth, wash your face, and go work out. Then, clean yourself up, go change, and get to work. Read at least 10 pages of a book throughout the day, drink plenty of water, be active, so if you have to get up from your desk, then do that. Go for a walk. Or if you can't go outside, do laps inside your office building. And remain active. Skip the candy bowl or the donut box in the office. Maintain discipline of you and your fulfillment of joy. And stop. And I mean right now, stop it. Comparing yourself with others and paying attention to any negative talk they may put towards you or you may put towards yourself. You are worth what you want to be worth. Be that person your dog thinks you are. Work to produce, not just consume. Work to create, not just use. We weren't put here to just exist, but to thrive, and we need to do it together. Surround yourself with like-minded people who have goals of their own and want to see you succeed. I know it may not seem that way sometimes because we do have some messed up friends, but when it's dark and seems impossible, they are right there, holding us accountable and expecting better out of us, even when we don't do it ourselves. Getting up every day with a positive attitude and a desire to do good is not always easy, especially as a police officer. We deal with all sorts of negativity and evil the average person doesn't even think about or would imagine was even possible. So what do? You get up, just like I said before, and face the day with a positive attitude. And remember that if you don't do it, who's going to? You put yourself in that position to be the person that goes out and does that stuff. Go out and do it. If that's not your job as a police officer, you're a hairdresser, or you're a plumber or whatever. Yeah, maybe you don't think that you're making a big difference. You're doing things for other people. You're serving other people one way or another. If you have a job that deals with people, you're serving them. Do it the best way you can. Keeping that in mind for myself, unfortunately, my guest today had an emergency at the last minute and was unable to be here with us today. So, knowing that I have an airing time, I'm still going to record for you guys, but I'm going to be sharing some stories of real-life police officers from across the country and their true stories of heroism and a desire to make their contribution meaningful and in line with their calling. In valor there is hope. I stood transfixed before these words carved in the modded granite. Candlelight reflected from thousands of badges gleaming proudly on the chest of the uniformed men and women. As I watched, the words began to expand and undulate in the time of the chorus of bagpipes as homage was paid to the thousands of names these few words would guard through eternity. I shivered despite the warmth of the May evening and felt an almost eerie sense of protection in the company of the souls of heroes. I looked away for a moment as the solemn sea of uniformed police officers raised their candles. There was something besides sadness to be read in these faces, but they, smooth and craggy, yellow, black, white, or brown. It was the steely look of resolve, visible through the tears flowing freely down their cheeks and onto their uniforms. I didn't bother to wipe away my own tears, for they bonded us together. Each one of us knew that we would never betray the trust placed in us by those we serve and those we serve with. We would never yield to those who would threaten or attempt to destroy our country or our way of life through crime, violence, or terror. We as a people will prevail over those who would harm us. None of us doubt the truth of these words. In valor there is hope. I saw it in the faces of our nation's police officers as they stood surrounding the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial, and heard it in the silent voices of those whose names lay forever carved upon its sacred stone. This is the opening to a book called True Blue by Sergeant Randy Sutton. Now, the first time I ever heard of Randy Sutton, I remember being a kid, and he was I used to watch Cops all the time, and it was, I started watching it when my aunt and uncle, they would watch it all the time, and that was a big thing where you watch Cops because, especially back in the 80s, where it's, you see all these idiots doing stuff, and you can see now, hey, just don't be like that, and the cops won't be called on you. And you always saw the guy with the wife beater and, getting, he had just beat up his girlfriend or whatever, and the cops are there, and they're like, well, I got to take you to jail, man. And it was just weird because it's super 80s, right? Well, in the 80s and into the 90s, you continue to start watching, especially before I was a police officer and I wanted to be a police officer. I started, we'd watch Cops whenever it was on. And It's funny because after I became a police officer, I stopped watching cops altogether. But Sergeant Sutton, he was a police officer that was in Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, and he was always they would always follow him around, whether they got assigned to him. I don't know how it worked out, but you always saw it. So that was one of those names that you saw, and he's got to have more episodes as far as the Las Vegas episodes are concerned than many of the other officers they followed around. Anyways, he wrote this book, and it's pretty much a chronicling of a whole bunch of different stories that police officers from across the country have sent him, and it kind of details major stories in their lives, whether it's funny or tragic or inspiring or whatever the case may be. But this book brings it out, and it's a great read if you have an interest in the police world whatsoever, which if you're listening to this, I would hope that you would. But the heroism that is shown in these people personifies what this podcast is about. What makes a hero? What is a hero? These guys are the heroes. These guys are what heroes are. So I'm going to go through a couple more. I'm going to go through a couple stories, and I'm also going to be reading from a second book. And when I get to it, I'll kind of detail what that book is. But I kind of want to stick on this one right now, True Blue by Sergeant Randy Sutton. Now, I do want to make sure that you understand that I'm not going to read the entire book, so this isn't a book reading. I'm just going to be pulling out portions of the book that are beneficial, and it's not going to be an 18-hour read for us. So the first one is called "Nothing Is Ever Routine." It's a little chapter in there, and this was by a 25-year police lieutenant in Del Rio, from the Del Rio Police Department. And this one it's just one of those ones that's it's a war story. So here we go. One of the duties we had in the small department where I worked was checking the houses of citizens who were out of town. When a citizen left town, they filled out a card providing information about when they were leaving and when they were returning. The card also provided space for the citizen to let us know what lights would be on, vehicles on the premises, pets, any damages to the structure, and any items in the yard. These checks had to be made once a shift by the patrol officer assigned to the area where the residence was located. And the check was recorded on the card the homeowner had filled out for us. I was working the midnight shift and came to work at 2200 hours. I received an out-of-town request for a check from my supervisor. I studied the request and saw that there would be a van parked in the driveway, no lights would be on, no damage to the exterior of the structure, and no pets. It was approximately 0300 hours on a cloudy night with no moon visible when I arrived at the house. Immediately, I noticed that there wasn't any street lighting available in that neighborhood. It was so dark I could hardly see 5 feet in front of me. I exited my patrol unit and listened for any sounds, but the night was quiet. To be tactical, I lowered my portable radio volume and decided not to use my flashlight, as I did not want to give away my presence anyways. I waited until my eyes adjusted to the darkness. It was totally focused, totally on guard. This was the way it was supposed to be. I started by checking the front of the residence and then the carport. Everything was as it should be. I proceeded down the east side wall of the residence, and again, everything was fine. I was extremely careful about every detail, walking slowly, making as little noise as possible when I moved. I stopped and listened for any sound before I turned a corner to check the rear of the house. Again, I heard nothing to cause any alarm. I started to check back the rear of the residence. I was starting to become complacent, since the check seemed routine. Just like the hundreds I had done before, I began to feel safe and no longer was so careful about making noise or checking my surroundings. As I reached the patio, I sensed movement. I didn't hear anything, but a quick jolt of adrenaline told me something was wrong. Before I could react, something struck me on both shoulders, a blow so hard it knocked me flat on my back. I saw 2 eyes staring at me and felt hot breath on my face. I attempted to remove my service revolver but was unable to grab it while falling backward. My life began to flash before me, but I was determined that I would not go alone. When I hit the cement of the patio, that weight of the attacker pinned me to the ground. I struggled to break free when suddenly I felt a large wet tongue licking my face. The biggest and blackest Labrador retriever I have ever seen lay on top of me, joyfully playing and licking me. The next stop was home, to change uniforms, for more than one obvious reason. Now, I start this out with this story because we, as police officers, go through things that we consider, hey, this is just, run of the mill. And like he mentioned in there, he got complacent. He got complacent with what he was doing, and he figured, you know what, I haven't run into anything, so I'm not going to run into anything. And that's a mindset sometimes, even just as people, not just police officers, but as people. We look at things and we think, hey, you know what, it's not happened before. What's going to make me think that it's going to happen now? And we look at that with everything. Well, if we took that attitude with everything that we did, we would go nowhere in life. And I mentioned this before, if you focus on just you and what's gone on, you'll never grow. You'll never become more. You'll never be there will never be more for you to reach and to achieve and to go after. And I mentioned this in the beginning, in the opening, that we're not just here to survive or to exist. We're here to thrive, right? If our idea was just to survive and to just be there for the moment and not for the bigger picture, nothing would ever be expected of us. Nobody would ever go do more. And that's the exact, I guess, you're looking at it, that's communism. We'll tell you what you need to do. You just go do that. You're a baker, and that's what you're going to do for the rest of your life. You're going to be a factory worker. That's all you're going to do is you're going to shine clay pots for the rest of your life. Whatever the case is. I don't know if you can shine clay pots, but shine steel pots for the rest of your life. That's all you do. What's the point? But you have these dreams, these grand dreams and these visions of becoming more. And I think that whole idea that we give ourselves, or we put ourselves in a box where we say we can't become more, is where our problem lies. Because I don't know about you, but I've spent a lot of my life doing things and then realizing, okay, that's not the way to do it, or, I can do this better. And then you start doing it better and do it more, and then realize, okay, I've reached the pinnacle of whatever that is. Let's say it's shining, steel pots. I've reached the pinnacle of that. Now I have to go to the point where now I want to do something more. I want to do something else. So I get introduced, or I get I read something that says, hey, actually there's this, and that shows an interest in me, and then I realize, hey, I can do that, and then I realize I've learned it and I'm good at it. I want to do that. So now as I do that, I just want to expand and become more and more, right? And all of us do that in everything we do. You take let's say a hairdresser, right? She learns to cut hair. That's the idea, because she's a hairdresser. But no, she's a cosmetologist. And so she learns to cut hair, but she also learns about nails, and she learns about eyebrows, and she learns about, all these different things, right? So she's more than just a hairdresser. So now it just keeps expanding on itself, and you can do more with that than just cut hair. Because if it's cutting hair, you give me a pair of clippers and we just buzz along the line of your head. Anybody can do that, right? But how many people do you know that actually has that haircut? Even the people that are fully bald, they have to meticulously, shave their head to where they don't hurt themselves and where it looks okay, and they got all the little spots of hair, right? Because it's just what we do. There's more to whatever it is we do than we give credit for. So where I'm going with this is nothing is routine. And if you want to just maintain a routine or whatever, you're going to get complacent. And when you get complacent, things happen. Sometimes bad things happen. Some things, no things happen. If you want to be complacent, you can do that. But just remember that if there's a point where you want to go become more and do more, then that is where you're not going to be happy. You're not going to be fulfilled, like I mentioned earlier, in just being complacent and just doing the same thing every day. It's just like eating food. I don't want to have, as good as we know that, let's say chicken breast, brown rice, and broccoli are good for you. And if you want to get to that point where you're totally ripped up and you look really good, magazine style abs, all that crap, eat that. Eat nothing but that for 3 months and see how you do. It'll look really good, but your mindset will be jonesing for a cheeseburger. I guarantee you. So, whatever the case may be, don't get complacent and stay in that same mindset where you're at. You got to go and do more. Become more. Little Johnny on the Front Porch. It's by a 7-year police officer with Hobbs PD. I'd been on patrol on my own for about 2 years. I was in the phase of a career where I wasn't a rookie anymore, and I thought I already knew just about everything there was to know about law enforcement. I had gotten past the initial shock of seeing my first dead person, homicide victim, child abuse case, and so on. I had made it through all of these situations and thought I was pretty hard. I had survived my first fight, high-speed pursuit, drug raid, ass chewing, and that was from my lieutenant. You hear stories of how police officers lose sleep and have to seek counseling due to the trauma and stress of the job. I had made it through all of this and never felt depression, anger, or sleeplessness. You had to be hard to be a police officer, and the guys who experienced those things were just not cut out for the job. This was my considered opinion after my first 2 years. This guy knows it all. My perception of the job, and maybe more importantly my perception of myself, was about to change. It was a nice summer evening in August, and I was working the swing shift, 2 to 10 p.m. It had been uneventful, and I was heading home for my lunch break. A call from the dispatcher came over the radio of a female down, unconscious and not breathing. I was only about 2 blocks from the address. All I could think was, damn it, I'm going to miss my lunch break again. It was probably some elderly lady who had passed away, and I was going to catch another report and be stuck on the scene all night waiting for the coroner to show up. It was my job, though, and I knew this is what I had signed up for, so I responded. I beat the paramedics to the scene by several minutes. For a cop, this was not always ideal. Sometimes you roll up into a situation that you're not capable of handling because you do not have medical expertise needed. You carry a gun and not a trauma kit. Applying pressure to a bleeding wound or starting CPR is just about all you are trained to do as a police officer. When I rolled up on this scene, it was different. The only thing I saw was a little boy. We'll call him Johnny. Johnny was sitting on the front porch with his face in his hands. Johnny was 9 years old and looked to be your typical little boy. Dirty blue jeans and sweaty hair, a bicycle sitting next to him. I assumed that Johnny's grandfather or grandmother had passed away. As an inexperienced cop, you seem to jump to conclusions and think you have it all figured out before you even have any of the facts. In your mind, you think you know everything because you made it past rookie year. All Johnny could tell me was that it was all his fault. Over and over again, Johnny kept saying it was his fault. I knew I shouldn't have left her and went outside to ride my bike. I wasn't real sure what I had on my hands at this point and asked Johnny where she was. Johnny, still crying and without lifting his head, pointed in the front door of the house. In the master bedroom, I found a 30-year-old woman hanging lifeless from the ceiling with a rope around her neck. It was apparent she was dead. I returned to Johnny on the front porch. He was still sitting and crying in his hands. I wanted to comfort him, but I needed to find out if this was suicide or homicide, or if the woman was even his mother. I placed my hand on Johnny's back and asked him what had happened. His mother's boyfriend called on the telephone and broke up with her, Johnny said. His mother was very upset, and he just wanted to get out of the house, so he went outside to ride his bicycle for a while until his mom calmed down. I'll never forget Johnny's anger at himself as he shouted at me. I knew I shouldn't have left her alone. I should have stayed with her. She was crying. I had never been so speechless in my entire life. I knew there was nothing I could do or nothing I could say that would provide comfort or relief to Johnny at this point. As a police officer, you always think you have all the answers and will be able to provide help to a child in time of need. But I had nothing in my arsenal to help Johnny with his pain. Johnny was blaming himself for the selfishness and death of his mother. I'm not one to preach, but for a mother to kill herself and leave that sight and responsibility for her son to live and deal with is unconscionable. Once the dust had settled and things were winding down, I began to feel something I had never felt up to this point in my career. I was totally helpless. What could I do? What could I say? The hard, terrible answer was nothing. I could only watch. I'll never forget Johnny sitting in the backseat of the detective's unmarked cruiser. No family could be located for the boy, and the only thing we had was a counselor from the state. The counselor was trying to help Johnny, but his face was turned away from her with the deepest, blankest stare I had ever seen. I will never forget his face with the mud created from the tears running down his dirty little cheeks. On the inside, I was crying, but I had to be hard, especially around my peers. In some ways, I've never stopped crying for Johnny on the inside. I've never forgotten that I am not a god, that I do not have all the answers. In this one night on the job, I learned more about life and myself than I had in the previous 2 years of my career, or probably any of the years that followed. Throughout my career in law enforcement, I was involved in homicide investigations, narcotics investigations, numerous high-speed chases, and 2 officer-involved shootings, but none of it had the impact on my heart as the night that I found little Johnny sitting on the porch with his tear-soaked face in his hands, blaming himself for his mother's senseless death. All of the training I had not prepared me for this. I remember sitting in those critical incident stress classes they give you in the academy thinking, this is ridiculous. Why don't they just teach us what we need and let us out on the street? Now I was thinking maybe I should have paid a little more attention. I lost sleep for the first time since becoming a cop. I started to wonder whether I was just one of those soft guys who wasn't cut out for the job. Surely that wasn't possible. This reaction must be normal. Just go home, have a few beers, and it will all go away. Now I know that this is why cops struggle with alcoholism at an alarmingly high rate. Too often we can't admit that something bothered us, got us down, made us helpless. We don't want to be looked upon as soft by the other officers, and it's so hard to admit that something is eating away at our mind and heart and soul. So we drown our feelings in a bottle. I was no different. I had to take a hard look at myself and my career. I had to face the fact that being tough and capable meant doing my level best, facing my fears and uncertainties, honestly. It was a tough process and scary too. None of the emotions I was feeling, though, would ever compare to what little Johnny would endure for the rest of his life. I often think about him, of where he is and what has become of him. I will have Johnny sitting on the porch with his face in his hands, engraved in my memory, forever. You know, starting back with this story, this officer just remembers and thinks of himself so highly that he's done some stuff. He's done this and that, and I know he knows things. He knows it all after 2 years. You know, I don't know anybody that does a job for 2 years. Well, there might be a couple, because there's only so much one can learn from, you know, entry-level jobs or whatever. But if you're doing anything that is more than yourself, that is serving others, none of that stuff is actually learned or totally developed within 2 years. And I've mentioned it before on the podcast that you're not really usable. And I remember one of my FTOs, my first FTOs told me this, said, you're not really usable as a police officer for at least 3 years after getting hired. Because you got to go through the academy, you're going through probation, you're learning all these life lessons, and you're maybe growing yourself, because a lot of guys are, in their 20s when they get started. I was a little bit older. I was 31 when I got started. But the idea is, when you start these things and you go through all this different stuff, you don't know everything. You think you do, and I think I mentioned it last podcast with Tim and Marcus, where I mentioned that, you think you know everything. And what else? I don't need to know. I don't need to learn anything. I pretty much know everything. And then, or I know a little bit about it. And so what else? No, there's so much more. There's so much more in life that we need to learn, that we have yet to learn, that we go through things and we think, hey, I've got this. Because I guarantee you, life will come in and it'll throw some curveball at you that you will have no idea what to do or how to deal with it. But hardening yourself and strengthening yourself and becoming that person that says, you know what, I can face this, I can face that, in every conceivable way. But I guarantee you, this guy did not conceive that this would happen, that he would come across this kind of call with this kind of situation. I know suicide pretty well. I've had family members that, unfortunately, this sort of thing happened with them, and they're no longer with us. I've been to calls where people have killed themselves because they're selfish, because they're thinking of, whether boyfriend broke up with them, or their mental health issues got to the point where they just didn't know how to cope with it anymore. There's some kind of relationship strife, whatever the case is. There's so many different little things that people think that is worth killing themselves for. And it's absolutely not. Nothing you can consider is worth killing yourself for. Your house is being foreclosed on. That's not worth killing yourself for. You have a lot of bills that are due. Not worth killing yourself for. Your relationship broke up. That's not worth doing it either. Because I'll tell you, every time that you take your life, or every time somebody were to take their life, they're leaving all these people. And why do you think there's so many people that are crying? They're around there, they're crying. It hurts every single person that gets involved. And I say everybody that gets involved because I mean the police officers, the paramedics, everybody that has to now deal with the aftermath of this. We're trying to figure out where we go from here. And it's not so much because we have an administrative expectation out of us, where we have to follow some rules and we have some boxes that we got to check. It has nothing to do with that. What it has to do with is the fact that there's a human life that is no longer here, and there are now people who have holes in their life, in their relationships, because that person is no longer there. And so now what they do is they start crying, they start being upset, and they start being sad. Now, you can't tell me that life was so bad that you didn't have anybody in your life to care for you or be there for you because there was some other guy, because somebody didn't love them. Right? People, you get especially Johnny here. Had I not gone for ridden my bike, had I been there for my mom, she probably wouldn't have done that. And maybe she wouldn't. He doesn't know. I've seen some horrible things out there, and it's possible. However, in his mind, had he not done this, gone out and played, would his mom have still committed suicide? I don't know. But there's much less of a chance. But he can't put that blame on him. She already had made up this decision. It wasn't a spur of the moment, I guarantee it. This is something that she'd been thinking about for a long period of time. At least one would think that would be the case. We can't get so wrapped up in one person or one thing and think the whole world is going to end because that's not my life anymore. The other side of it is we have so much other things that we need to live for. We have people in our lives. We have people that want to be around us. And if you don't think that people want to be around you, you're not paying attention. Look up, look around, detach for a second, and say, let's look at the big picture, and then see what people want you to be around. Because there are people that want you around, that people want you in their life. And I guarantee that is the case. Everybody has somebody in their life that wants them to be around. Now, like I mentioned also in the beginning, there are people that will hold us accountable, and we don't like being held accountable sometimes. If I might say to somebody, hey, you know what, that's not a great idea, and I don't think what you did there was appropriate, or whatever the case is, a lot of people take that as an attack. It's not an attack. I'm helping, at least my intent is to try to help you get better, try to help you be better. And if I have a relationship with you that I want to see you succeed, and I want to see you do better, and I want to see you do more, with that expectation, I put that on you and I say, that's not the right thing to do. That's not the right way to go. You know, you should be considering this. Or if somebody says, hey, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go invest, $1 million into this thing right here. Do you have $1 million? No, I'm going to take a loan out for you. Is that a great idea? That sort of thing. I know that's your dream, and the risk is there, but I want you to look at the angles. I want you to consider all these different things. And if I'm saying that, and this is personally myself talking, that if I'm saying that, I want to see the best out of you. I want to see the best for you. So if you are feeling like, hey, it'd be better if I wasn't here. It wouldn't be better if you weren't here. Absolutely wouldn't be better if you were here. Everybody's needed, and you have a place in everybody's life. I guess the adverse side of that is that people don't think about themselves. They think they go through and people are thinking bad about them, or when they do something, it's because they don't like that person or whatever their case is. And that's never the case either. You'd be surprised how much people do not consider other people, especially outside of their own little circle. That other circle of ours, that thing that we don't consider all the time, and that we don't deal with, that we run into these people either in passing, or we know them at church, or we know them at work, or we know them at school, or we know them wherever, and we have a very small period of our life where they're a part of it, and then we think, oh my gosh, I care so much about what that person thinks. Don't, because I guarantee you they don't care so much what you think. Now, you can care about them, but you don't have to care about what they think so much that you change your life, because you're thinking about what they think and what they care about more than what you think and what you care about. Like I said, be that person your dog thinks you are. That's the person you want to care for them. You want to love them. If you're willing to care and love for somebody else, right, do that for yourself. And if you don't have that love for yourself, that you want to take care of yourself, then, as I talked about with Susie, you need to talk to somebody. You need to have some counseling. And it's not so much because you're crazy or whatever, and that has nothing to do with it. And I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that you need to talk with somebody, because the good chance is they're going to have some kind of input from an outside perspective to say, hey, did you look at it from this angle? Hey, did you look at it from that angle? And there's not an attack. The other side of it is, it shows, of this story anyways, there shows the human side of the police officer caring so much about little Johnny and what he's gone through. And he said he continues to think about where he's at. That would just assume that he doesn't know where he's been, what he's done, if they couldn't find a next of kin or find any family for him. There's a good chance he went into the foster system. And who knows what can happen in there. Now, I know some folks that raise kids that are foster homes, that are respite homes. And if it weren't for people like that, there wouldn't be there would be an absolute loss of potential in this planet. But there's people that actually absolutely love and want to help take care of people that need the help. But there's people that just do it for whatever other reason, and we don't know. And then I guess the other angle of that would be that the kids get in there and they see somebody who just kind of provides a house. There's no growing relationship. Ultimately, what we want to do, and this is the basis for what we do, is relationships. We have to relationship build. We have to develop what we say, what we do, how we act with other people. With other people. We can't just do it on our own and say, I'm doing this. If you want to come along, then you come alongside me and start doing what I do. That's not the way it works. If we want to do something, we have to have a give and take. We have to be able to work with somebody. If we're in a leadership role, you got to work up the chain of command, and you got to work down the chain of command. You motivate up, you motivate down. You got to be all this different stuff. But relationships is where change gets made. If change isn't made, then nothing happens. So you have to have the relationships before you do anything else and you go anywhere else. And unfortunately, we don't know what happened with little Johnny. And we'd like to think that, he became this positive member of society and all this different stuff. We just don't know. There's absolutely no knowledge of even who Johnny is. Right? And for this officer, he may not even know. But hopefully, with the fact that this officer showed so much compassion and so much hurt, that he was able to show that and give that, I guess show that that side to Johnny, so he understands the human side of this officer. And that's something that we can't hold on. We can't sit back and just say, hey, you know what? I got to be hard, and I got to be tough, and I got to be all this different stuff. So then I can make sure that everybody knows that, I'm not to be messed with and all this different stuff. Who cares? Who cares? Yes, there's a thing. If you want to train, you want to go do karate, or you want to go do jiu-jitsu, or you want to go do Muay Thai or whatever, and you want to do all these martial arts, you want to be a tough fighter guy, and you can shoot really well, and you can do all these things. Great, awesome, cool. Do that. But don't forget the human side. Don't forget that side that says, I've got to take care of other people, because there's a point where you have to be there for other people, and you have to be there emotionally for other people. Now, you don't have to be an emotional person, but you have to be there, and you have to, especially if you have that relationship with them. And not everybody needs to be tough and need to be so hard that they can't be approached. They can't be approachable. They can't be that thing, that person that nobody wants to be around, because they're the ones that we break glass in case of emergency type guys. Well, there are those guys out there. But what happens when there's not very many emergencies and we need more humans? When we need more people, friends, family next to us because we're struggling. That's the important side of it. Be that guy that can do all those things. There's an old samurai quote that says, oh man, if I can remember it, because I'm just going off the top of my head on this one, but it basically says, be a friend to everybody, be nice, be courteous, be gentle to everyone, but have a plan to kill everyone in that room, or know how you would do it. Right? So you know how to do it. You know what you would do. You know how to go. You know how to shoot a gun really well. You know how to punch really well. You know how to fight. You know how to do all these different things. But in that, with that little piece of knowledge, those tools, put those in your tool belt. Have those available if need be. But in the meantime, be nice, be generous, be courteous, be a professional, and go out of your way to help other people. And the last thing I wanted to say on this is that this shows this officer's human side. Who is the human that this guy was? Who is that human? Because police officers, they're not just this car that drives through town, or it has a guy sitting in the seat, or these people that are unapproachable. It doesn't have this side of cops who are the cops aren't just these I don't know, these things that the media portrays them out to be, where they're mean or they're rude or whatever the case is. They're not. And I guess I'm saying I'm a little jaded on this, because I'm saying this as one, and as one who doesn't like it when somebody mistreats their gear, mistreats their unit, mistreats their brothers or sisters. I hate that. I hate seeing that. I hate seeing a a politician or a news media outlet that says, the police did this and they did that, and that it's a lie, or it's not true, or there's some base of truth there. However, it has been twisted and turned into something that is not true, right? Nothing gets my blood boiling faster. But how do I control that? I don't let it I don't get emotional about it, and I need to detach from it. But this idea that whatever the media is trying to portray as police officers being is not true. And I don't care who you are. If you think, well, I know for XYZ this happened to me, let's talk about it. Talk about it. And I guarantee you police officers are willing to talk about it. And if they did something that you didn't like because, they treated you wrong or they treated you this way, understand that, one, they may have had to do that because the law dictates that they do things a certain way. They have some things that we have to do, that we have some boxes that we have to check because there are administrative rules that we have to follow. And it may not be, the best way to do it, or you don't think it's fair, and that's fine. But understand, it's not that personal preference of that police officer that is the reason that he's doing what he did. The other side of it is you have to, and we all have to do this. We all have to take some kind of ownership in what it is we do. How do we do the things that we do? You have to take ownership in those things. Everything that we do, there's a two-sided thing. Somebody stops at a stop sign, right? And then another car, and they get in a crash in an intersection with a stop sign. I think there's a law in New York that basically talks about that, where there's some implied culpability on both sides. Now, one could be found at fault more so, and they get the ticket or whatever. But for the main part of what I'm saying is that there's some culpability in everything that happens. Should I have gone? Did I do everything in my power to be able to avoid that crash? And sometimes it comes out of nowhere. Sure. But there's always that other side where somebody says, well, I went through, but they were going way too fast. Maybe they were. Were they going, the speed limit is 25. Were they going 26? Yeah. Okay. So there's some culpability there. You're breaking the law by 1 mile an hour. It's not so much of it gets into, there's some gray area when you start getting into ethical things like this and the questions that come up from that. However, the idea is that if you consider everything that you do in your life, is there some culpability that you have? Everything that you do, can you take responsibility for the various things? And we can all say that we do. We all should say that we do. And you take that ownership. And not so much that you take in like, okay, it's on me, poor me, oh my gosh. No, you start getting into depths of despair, and that's not what I'm talking about. You take ownership, and then you work on different ways in order to say, I'm not going to let that happen again. I'm going to learn from this mistake. I'm going to learn how to be better. And that's what I was talking about, what I've been talking about all along. Be better. How do you go about being better? Unfortunately, we've got to learn. We've got to experience, and we've got to go through things that we don't want to go through in order so we can learn and become better and become more. So that's enough. I'm going to stop harping on that one. So the next one is from a book called Dark Nights, The Dark Humor of Police, and it's written by an author named Robert L. Bryan. Now, this one is specifically set towards this book, NYPD, but it's more humorous and it's more derived from that. And I'm going to read the prologue to you first, and because it really sets a stage for where this author's mindset was when writing this book and how he wanted to make sure that we all understand where he's coming from, but where his love lies. So, police officers wear a shield on the left side of their uniform because it carries the symbol of the knights of old, the protectors of the ancient society. The shield represents the modern commitment that law enforcement officers have made as warriors, servants, and leaders to serve and protect. Police officers are modern knights, going to work each day with a noble cause to protect our society and ensure our welfare. That is the culture that has helped us shape my perspective, a perspective with little patience for political correctness. For me, the last sanctuary of political incorrectness was my police locker room. Whether it was an NYPD precinct, a transit police district, or a housing police PSA, there was a refreshing, anything-goes atmosphere, relatively free from fear of formal complaints. In a police locker room, equal opportunity offenders ruled the day. Race, religion, or ethnicity mattered little. At one time or another, everyone found themselves in the crosshairs. Thankfully, the vast majority of cops who I worked with could laugh at anything, including themselves. I believe much of the cop sense of humor develops out of necessity. Cops tend to see people at their worst. They see death, tragedy, crime, and despair on a daily basis. The very nature of the tasks cops perform and the things cops see skews their sense of humor. Sometimes a sense of humor is the only defense mechanism in a police officer's toolbox. Stripped of the ability to laugh or forced to be politically correct in a politically incorrect work environment can be hazardous to one's health. Coping becomes an essential component of police officers' arsenal. One of the primary coping mechanisms utilized by cops is humor. A cop can find something funny about almost anything, regardless of how tragic the circumstances. Dark humor involves making light of the serious, disturbing, or taboo subject matter. It is something viewed as morbid, cruel, offensive, and graphic in nature, and yet is still found funny. I spent 20 years with the New York City Transit Police Department and NYPD, and during my career, I worked with some of New York's darkest nights. Those cops, and nights spelled Knights, those cops who day after day put their lives on the line for the people of the city of New York, but still found time to laugh, even under the most difficult circumstances. In my humble opinion, policing is the noblest of professions, which is why it is appropriate to link the character of police officers to the qualities of medieval knights. This book, however, contains no heroic sagas or gallant tales, but instead contains day-to-day stories of police officers doing their jobs during the timeline of my career. These stories are true, but I have decided to use first names, initials, and nicknames for the characters who molded my career, just in case any of those individuals don't possess the sense of humor that I think they do. The stories are tragic, sad, morbid, gruesome, and just plain dumb. Most of all, however, I believe these stories are funny. I hope you think so too. The first story I'm going to read is called George of the Watch. Most of the lessons learned by young police officers did not come from their studies at the police academy. A significant amount of skills necessary for success on patrol came under the tutelage of veteran officers. Skilled veteran officers would impart knowledge developed over years of experience, such as how to spot the sign of a person about to turn aggressive and the locations where people could secrete weapons on their bodies or in their bodies. Sometimes even the hairbags could provide good hints to young cops. A lesson on memo books, for example, was provided by District 4 resident hairbag police officer George. Every police officer on patrol was required to carry and maintain a memo book. NYPD officers only made entries in their memo books when police action was taken, but transit police officers were required to make entries at a minimum of every 20 minutes. The 20-minute requirement could cause issues resulting in discipline because nobody made memo book entries as they patrolled. To the contrary, after an hour or so, most cops would stop and catch up on entries for the preceding hour. The problem with playing hourly catch-up was that the entries may not be completely accurate. For example, a cop working at West 4th Street may make the following memo book entries at 1400 hours. 1300 hours, notebook, F platform, NPC, no police condition. 1320, SB, F platform, NPC. 1335, middle mezzanine, NPC. 1345, NB, A platform, NPC. 1400, vicinity booth, N83, NPC. As you can see, it was no police condition. It was easy to go in. At 1320, the cop may or may not have actually been on the SB platform. And if a passenger reported being a victim of a crime on the SBF platform at that time, the cop could have a problem. Enter Professor George. George instructed every young cop who would listen on how to properly fill out a memo book. According to George's lesson plan, memo book entries should never be made on a 0 or a 5. Now, the rationale for this lesson was the fact that people always reported incidents on the 0 or the 5. George explained that when questioned, a robbery victim was going to state that he was robbed at 2 o'clock or at 2:15, not 2:02 or 2:11. Therefore, the professor continued, memo book entries should always be made on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, or 9. George stated that when the bosses started to investigate the whereabouts of the post cop for a robbery reported at 2 p.m., the first thing done was to pull the memo book and check the entries for 2 p.m. And if the cop placed himself at the location of the robbery at 2 p.m., he had a problem. That is why George continued. It was critical to make entries on the in-between numbers. He asserted that even if the cop's entry had been at 2:01, he would not have a problem because a lot can happen in the minute's time. George then related a tale about an instance where a crime was reported at one of those in-between times, but that he was still able to outsmart the bosses. George talked about the incident several years ago in which a female was raped on the north end of the northbound platform at the 23rd Street and Lexington Avenue station. He continued that the victim reported the time of the incident at 2:03 a.m. George had been the post cop, and when his memo book was inspected, it revealed the following entry. 02:03, 23 seconds, Lex North End, northbound platform, NPC. George had documented that he was at the exact location of the rape at the exact time it was occurring. A lesser man might have been intimidated by this precarious situation, but not George. George proudly stated that he remained as cool as a cucumber under the interrogation of a snarling lieutenant. He recounted that the lieutenant obviously believed that he had him cornered when he asked him to explain how he could have been at the north end of the northbound platform at 23rd and Lex at 02:03 hours when in fact a woman was being raped at that location at that exact time. George paused to make sure his audience was intently listening and then said that he ended the session with one simple statement. Lieutenant, with all due respect, are you trying to tell me that while this broad was getting banged, she was looking at her watch? Class dismissed, kiddies, was his final comment. Now, I'm not advocating anything that George did. And now let's be honest. I'm going to put a little caveat here. This George is not George that was on my podcast, podcast 8. It's not any George that I know. But and I'm not advocating that you fill out your memo books incorrectly or untruthfully. I'm not saying that you talk poorly about people who have been in horrible situations. What I'm saying, and what I find humorous about this, is that yes, this whole thing can happen. This whole thing is, do your job and do it right. But that doesn't mean George wasn't doing his job. He was there. He was doing his job. Sometimes, and we talked about this earlier, is we get complacent. And here's the trick, and here's the reason this happens. Because police officers are human. I know the news media doesn't want us to believe that we're not human and we don't make mistakes. We don't get lazy. We don't get tired. We don't get selfish. We don't get any of that stuff. That's reserved for other people. Unfortunately, the police are expected to be better. We're expected to hold this higher standard. We're expected to be more. And you know what? For the most part, the police officers I know, the police officers I've met, and the police officers in these stories, they do more. They go above. They go beyond. They learn their lessons. They learn these hard lessons. And some of these hard lessons are lessons some people will never learn in their entire life. And I'm not bad-mouthing anybody else, but what I'm saying is that these police officers go through life learning these lessons, seeing this horrible stuff, seeing these taboos, seeing this wretched, evil vileness that's out in the world, and still being able to live a regular life, raise their children, be happy, healthy, and know where their base is, where their homeostasis is. That's the important thing that we have to remember, and that's something I think a lot of us forget, is that when we go through things that everybody expects, the police officers, they're going to be able to do it. Well, I'll tell you what, I've seen police officers cry. I've seen police officers break down and have to actually take time off and go do nothing. I know a police officer that got into a shooting the day after, and it was on his birthday. The day after the shooting, he was out on his tractor on his property just digging holes for no reason, just to dig holes, just to have his mind go numb. Why? Because he's human. Because he was doing what somebody expected him to do because nobody else was there to do it. And had he not done it, people would have gotten hurt or died. So the I guess the moral of this story, as funny as it is, it is humorous. Absolutely. I think it's totally funny. And like I said, it doesn't show that George wasn't doing his job. He was on the platform. He was on the train. He was doing his job, making sure people are safe and doing stuff. But he can only be in where he was at. Now, is it his fault for not filling out his book? Absolutely. So once again, we have that culpability. But is it his fault that this poor woman was raped? No, it's not his fault. It's the guy who raped her. That's whose fault it was. So when we get on police officers, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, and how come you guys are just... You know, the police officers that I know and the police officers that do everything they can by waking up every morning to go out and provide safety and security for their fellow citizens, for their society, for their communities. Those police officers, they want to do good. Nobody wakes up in the morning thinking, you know what, I'm going to do kind of just a mediocre job, or I'm going to wake up and I just want to come in here and I want to, I want to go do bad. I want to go do some bad stuff that's going to get me in front of the national news, and I want to do something that's horrible that's going to get me put to prison for the next however long, and I want to make sure that I make children cry, and I make sure that I treat people horribly, and so they have a very bad view of my chosen profession that I've been doing for, 10 years. Honestly, do you think people want to do that? Any person, much less a police officer who's not even really they're still learning up to 3 years, right? I mentioned this before. They're still learning in that time, and then they go in and they start going to become more. And so they spend all this time getting stressed out and losing sleep and worrying about and crying and getting personal with people who they just met and building relationships and doing all these things just so they can go to prison and be hated even more. Because let's look at this side of it. A police officer in prison, do you really think that a lot of those guys in there are they love the cops? They're the ones holding the blue line flags on the side of the street, saying thank you for your service. And I'm talking about the hardcore mean guys in prison, the killers, the rapists, the drug dealers, all these guys. Are those the guys that are happy? Oh, hey, here's a cop. Hey, oh, you were a cop? Oh, what did you do? You did that? Oh, that's cool, man. Really? You really think they're gonna like that? I don't. The bottom line is, cops are humans. And I've mentioned in all the stories I've talked about today, I've read today, they're all humans. Every single one of them is human, and they want to do what's right. They get scared about something. They get worried about something. They get bothered by it. They get emotional. They get all these different things because we're human. If that's just a hard concept for some people, especially in the political world, they don't see police as human. They're working a job. They're trying to work a job where they can go ahead and raise their families and get their kids through schools, and they can enjoy life as well. It's a dangerous job, and it's the only job that I know, one of the only jobs that I know, where you have a chance of dying every time you get handed a project. They call you for, hey, this could be a littering call, and it can turn into a shooting, or it can turn into a stabbing or an ambush. Littering. Somebody threw a piece of paper on the ground, and now you have to go deal with it, right? It could be the most minute thing. And people don't realize that the police that go out there and do that, they're taking the chance of being away from their families for the rest of their life. They're taking the chance of their children growing out without a mother or a father. They're taking the chance of not living their dreams and seeing their potential totally come to fruition. So what I'm saying is that all these people are human. All these police officers are human, and none of them, not a single one, brings up the fact that, that they're racist and all this stuff that the news media and politicians and everybody are saying that police are racists, or they're selfish, or they're mean, or they're you name it. None of them are that way. Except for all of them are that way. And what do you mean by that, Ken? Well, what I mean by that is that every single one of them, and I'll say it again, and I said it 7 minutes ago, they're all human. They're human. They have fears. They have worries. They have self beliefs. They have things that they desire. They have wants, and they have loves, and they have hates, and they have things they detest, and all that stuff like that. But it's not because they're a bad person. It's not because they want to do bad. It's not because they want to see, all these huge, horrible changes for everybody else, and that everybody, nobody's able to live in a safe community or society. It's because they're human. And they all want to do good. They all start out wanting to do good. Now, I guess I can't say all of them, because there are some that get into it for a very personal, selfish reason, and they want to lord over people, or they're sociopaths, or whatever the case is. Sure, there is that small group of people that are that way. But for the most part, for the majority of people that become police officers, they get into it because they want to help people, and they want to be more for somebody else. And we can't forget that, because there's sacrifice when those ones that have not been able to make it home, because somebody decided they wanted to take them from their children, or from their wife, or from their husband. Those ones that weren't able to make it home, those are the ones that gave everything so that others can make sure that they live, and so that others can have that ability to go live their dreams and have their hopes and live securely where they're at. Because they're the ones that are driving around your neighborhoods at night while you sleep, dealing with the people who are breaking into your cars, breaking into your house, breaking into your business, hoping that they can get just that little bit extra, so that either they can go get drugs, or they think they're going to get one up on somebody else because of their selfishness. And these knights, as we talked about, they're the ones who are now there to help put that line between evil and good. That line between those prey and the predator. And if you think you're the toughest man alive and all this different stuff, there's a point where you become a prey, because you have to sleep at some point. You have to go to that point where you have to go recharge. You have to go out. You're going to go out to dinner for your grandma's birthday, and everybody's going to be there, and you're going to be sitting there in a booth or behind a table or something like that, and all of a sudden, somebody comes in. Are you able to react in time? You're sleeping. Are you able to react in time? Yeah, I get it. That, yes, you do all these different things, but there's a point where you need somebody else to come alongside you and protect you. That to be there for you, to be that line between good and evil. And that's what that blue line is. is that line between good and evil. And everybody talks about the blue line, the thin blue line, especially recently. It's become very a very popular thing because there's a lot of stigma around the blue line flag. There's police departments in other parts of the country where they're being told they can't fly that flag, or they're saying that that blue line flag is racist, or they're saying that blue line flag is whatever. It is not. And I'm going to put it, and I'll say it right now, it is not racist. It is not something to lord over somebody. It is a reminder for those that do this job and those people who support those people that do this job. It is a reminder that there is a line between good and evil, and at any minute, that police officer who is human, who deals with emotion and jealousy and fear and hate and anger and love and all these different things that every human being deals with. This one person, he has to hold himself above, and he has the ability that at any time he could teeter and go to one side or the other because it is so difficult. But he maintains and he holds that line to know that this blue line is where I'm going to stand because I'm going to protect the people behind me, because that's my job, because if I don't, who else is going to? From these people on the other side who are there to cause pain and havoc and despair and mistrust and hatred and selfishness and all these different things that the evil dregs of society try to push onto people who do not want to do that. There's a line held by police officers to make sure that we can go out and we can go live our lives. And that thin blue line is hard to maintain sometimes. And that flag that flies with that blue line in the middle of it, that flag is a reminder of what it is, that why it is what we do. It's an offshoot of our American flag, and I love that flag. And below that is that blue line flag that we have to remember that is where, that is a symbol of a reminder of what it is and why it is what we do. So with that, I'm going to close this episode of the podcast with the closing of True Blue by Randy Sutton. I am a cop, and I believe. I believe in my badge and all that it stands for. For courage, for honor, and for compassion, for unity and integrity and sacrifice. I believe in the men and women who stand beside me with gleaming gold and silver worn proudly on their chests. I know of their triumphs, and I know of their pain. For cruelty and violence are the acid that corrodes our souls, and it is belief alone that can shield us from being consumed. Our purpose and destinies lie in protecting of others. I believe that cops are warriors. They are soldiers in one sense, because combat is very real and very personal and never far from reality. But cops are much more. They are the peacemakers, and their courage is tempered by their compassion. Every cop knows that each day may be his or her last. They know that violence may take them, and they may fall, and yet they go on. They go on because of belief in something greater than themselves. They believe in justice. Noble words? You bet they are, and I'm proud to say them, for I am a cop, and I believe. Justice is not a hypothetical theory to a cop, nor is it a concept open to debate. It is real and as visceral as the mournful sound of taps when another uniform-clad body is laid to rest. It is something to be fought for, and if necessary, to die for. Yes, I'm a cop, and I believe. I believe that when my career is over and I no longer shoulder the burdens of my profession, I will look back with pride. Pride in myself and in the knowledge that I did my best. Pride in my brothers and sisters for continuing on. And most of all, pride in my badge and for all that it stands for. I am a cop, and this is what I believe. And, when I read that, it is what I believe in. It is what I go after and what I strive to do and consider when I go to work and when I come home and when I do the daily things that I normally would do. And I listen to and I read all these stories of all this stuff that's going on politically, where they want to defund the police and they want to have all these different laws for police reform and all this stuff. And it's a scary time, and it worries me. Yeah, there's a certain sense of self-worry and self-concern. Will this job be here for me? All this different stuff, sure, but that's not the main concern. My main concern is our society and our community. If the police aren't there, if law enforcement isn't there, what happens to those people who do nothing but prey on others when there's nobody there to stand before? What happens to society? Tourists don't want to visit towns. They don't want to go to those places. They know that, it's actually pretty safe to go there. People won't want to open businesses places, develop economies, because they know that it's not going to be safe for them to do so. When good men and women do nothing, evil will start taking over like vines on a building. You ever seen those pictures of what it would look like if man was never there and Mother Nature was just able to reclaim the earth? And they have pictures actually of these places in, Russia or wherever, of these abandoned towns where just vegetation has just overgrown everything and taken back. If there's not somebody there, evil will start overgrowing like that vegetation. And then people will have to defend themselves. And those people that have to defend themselves, those people are not necessarily the people that's not what they were designed to do. They might be an artist. They might be an old lady who likes to crochet all the time. Awesome. Do it. Be the artist. Be the crocheter. Be the plumber. Be the hairdresser. But that's what you chose to do, and that's what you find passion in, and that's what you find as your thing. Do that. Be that. But understand there are people out there who will do evil and do harm to those because they can, not because there's any other choice, but because they can and they want to. And there has to be somebody that decides to get in front of that and say, I'm not going to let that happen. That's where your police officer comes from. That's where our police officers come from. Because, and I've said it before and I mentioned it, if not me, then who? If not me and my brothers and sisters beside me holding that line, then who? The old lady's going to have to put down her crochet needle and pick up a gun because there's someone coming on her property to try to hurt her? Or the mom who's at the park with her children is going to have to come into defense of her children, and while she's dealing with this guy, something else happens to her children? No, she should be able to go to the park with her children knowing that they're going to be safe and they're going to have fun and they're going to play and they're going to learn and they're going to be able to go home later and have lunch and do all the things that they're going to do. Or you cannot have that, and you can live in a society where evil runs rampant, takes over. The concern is real. And unfortunately today in 2021, we have to consider this horrible side. So I would encourage you that you talk to your city councilors, you talk to your county commissioners, you talk to your state representatives, you talk to your congressmen, you talk to your mayors and your governors and about the dangers of removing police officers from our society. We need them. We need them. We want them. They have to be here. They're not here to ruin your day. They're not here to. They don't go out of their way to try to ruin your day. They try to go after the people who are selling drugs around kids that are at parks. They try to go deal with people who are beating their wives. They try to deal with people who are beating their husbands. They try to deal with people who are, and they try to hold accountable those people who are trying to hurt other people and destroy other people's dreams and their lives because of their selfishness. That's what the police officers in your society, in your community, are trying to do. Whether you think so or not, you have to take some culpability. Look inside yourself. Look inside yourself and see where you have ownership in this. Are you contributing to the problem, or are you contributing to the positive results? Like I said at the beginning, you can either be a consumer or you can be a producer. Your choice. And with that, I'm going to close this episode of the What's a Hero podcast. Now remember that you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and the ever-famous Facebook, and that's at What's a Hero, or you can just type in What's a Hero podcast. We're also at the What's a Hero podcast website, our website, which is the What's a Hero podcast.buzzsprout.com. Now, if people have asked, what's Buzzsprout? So Buzzsprout is the actual the company in which I send my podcast to, and they upload it to all the podcast sites: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Deezer, all these different guys who you might listen to this podcast on. Buzzsprout is the company that sends them to these guys. So I do all the editing. I do everything in-house. However, they distribute it for me. So in other words, they're my distributor. Nevertheless, with that, they help produce my website, which is the What's a Hero podcast.buzzsprout.com, and you can find all the episodes on there. You can also find the whatever podcast host you want to go through, and if you can find it and say, hey, I listened to it through there, and then we'll help you download from there. Now, downloads they're absolutely helpful for me. They're cool because what they do is they let me know who all is listening, where you guys are listening, and then how many people are downloading. Now, a lot of people download or just listen directly from the website, which is cool, absolutely cool. But I think I'm like everybody else. I like to see numbers, right? I want to see, I got, however many downloads this way and that sort of thing. And so when it's fun to do that, but I get it. If you don't want to download and you just want to listen to it on your phone or whatever, that's cool. Because you don't want to use up your memory and all that stuff like that. Absolutely fine. Just whatever the case is, if you wanted to, would be kind of cool, is post something on our Facebook page, or you can even post a review. Post a review on whether it's Apple Podcasts or Amazon or whomever, and post a review about what you think about the podcast, what you think we can do differently or do better, or, who you'd like to maybe even see on here. Say, hey, I got a cousin, or I got a friend who's a police officer, a firefighter, or a doctor, a teacher, or a veteran, if they're actually, they're in the military right now, they just got out, they retired, they used to be in it, whatever the case may be, active or former, that's the kind of folks we want to talk to. But this is where you can kind of interact with me. Let me know that you're here, because it helps me know what it is I can help produce and bring out to everybody. And plus, I only know so many people. There's a million other heroes out on this planet that I would love to talk to. And they're on the East Coast. Let's say they're on the East Coast. It's easy for me to be able to. We can zoom them in, and they don't have to fly here to where I'm at. They can stay where they're at, and we can talk to them. We have this very cool, neato thing called the interwebs that I can get into, and we can talk to people that way. So, nevertheless, let me know. You can email me. You can direct message me on any one of those platforms that I talked about, the social media platforms I talked about, and we can go from there. So it's cool. I appreciate everybody that listens. I have fun doing this, and we want to keep going with it. So, and I do want to mention that you can get any of the books I read today on Amazon. That's where I got them. So if you're interested in reading these books further, go to Amazon, go pick them up. They're not too expensive, and they're actually pretty fun reads. So with that, I want to thank you. If you do one of those jobs, I want to thank you for being you and holding that line, serving other people, and being that person that you are. There's some people just they're not cut out for it, and some people are. And if that's you and that's what you do, thank you. If that's not you, and you don't go to work as a police officer or firefighter or EMT or any of those, that's not what you do, but you support those people. You're a support personnel that person needs. Remember, I talked about several podcasts ago where the idea is that a frontline soldier, it takes like 10 other soldiers to be there for support, whether it's logistics or admin or planning or supply or whatever, to make sure they have all the gear and all the needs and all the things are met so they can go do their job. Well, that's the same idea. These police officers, firefighters, these vets, everybody that goes out and does this, they need a support person at home to supply that emotional support and provide that ability to do their job knowing that they're doing the right thing. So thank you if you are a family member, a spouse, or just a best friend of somebody who goes and does this job, because they need you. So with that, I want to thank everybody for listening. This has been the What's a Hero podcast. I've been Ken. And until we see each other again, or talk to each other again, I guess, in this medium, we are clear.